Hello, welcome everybody to FRB Friday Vibe. Welcome Stuart, welcome back Maria. Hey, Maria's back. That's what we like to see. So good to have you back, Maria, and good to see you fit and healthy.
Thank you.
And joining us on the Vibe. And you join us at a interesting situation. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk through the different sessions we've been running, the exploration sessions, and we're going to share our thoughts and the wisdom we have gained from these sessions. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I think we'll then, hopefully at the end, we'll come to sharing our thoughts on what it means, what it means for responsible business. So let's jump into it, shall we? Stuart, do you want to kick us off with your thoughts on the discussions around AI? Perhaps let's go around the main groups we've been running so far. So let's do sort of digital stroke AI. What are your thoughts on that, Stuart?
Okay, so on AI, we've explored a number of different topics. We've looked at sort of opportunities, capabilities, the business case, ethics and morals, all those sorts of, I guess, top things that most companies are crossing. I think there's a number of lessons learned, and I think there's some wisdom that I guess we haven't got the time to go through it all. But just some of the key points, I guess, would be on opportunities. I guess it was fascinating that there was more of a balance between automation and new opportunities, as in, I guess we walked into the meeting thinking most companies are trying various pieces of AI to automate certain jobs, but actually, these days, especially with sort of generative AI, it opens up brand new, either revenue generating opportunities and or new markets or new things that they never envisaged being possible in the past. And I think there's as much going on in that world than there is just automating traditional stuff. So I think that that was quite interesting. I think from a capabilities perspective, I think everyone gets the need for some of the skills, the technical skills you need, the people skills. I guess the eye opener is it's much broader than that, right? Every department needs AI levels of competency, from your legal teams to your finance teams to your HR teams. Everyone needs it impacts the whole organization. So equipping your whole organization with capabilities, I think, came out. And then it's just not just the people capabilities, it's things like data governance. Some companies are very sophisticated on their data governance processes and techniques, whereas others, it's never really been seen as a high priority. And obviously GDPR and other things sort of helped this over the years.
Sure.
But AI just takes this to steroids, because if your data's rubbish, then you're never going to get what you expect to get from an AI solution. Because data is so inherently important, right? So then it's not just a one-off exercise. It's making sure that your data's wholesome, it's integral, it's not biased, etc. I just think the data governance capabilities sort of came to light. I think overall, I think some of the big lessons learned are the significant difference between the speed of execution of getting something done on AI, because these days that can be relatively quick, because you can buy data or borrow data, you can use existing algorithms and things to generate solutions. So your skunk works capability can be really, really quick to generate some sort of some visibility of some sort of prototype, I guess. But there's a massive difference between that and doing a fully productionized, trusted thing that you're going to use, customer facing or otherwise, to take a key role as part of your business makeup, right? And they are worlds apart, right? And I think a lot of companies are running into doing some skunk works, getting quite excited, but then actually when they start to realize what they're actually going to do to get all of their data right, to protect their data, to make sure you got security, the ethics, the morals, the all of the capabilities right to maintain, validate, verify, the solutions on an ongoing basis, is an immense undertaking for some of these things, and the Skunk Works just doesn't bring that to light, right? So I think there's a bit of an eye opener, a bit of a shock for businesses in terms of really then realizing what it really takes to do this stuff and do it right. So I think that's really big, and validation. I just touched on it. That I think that came out in terms of wisdom. And it's not just testing that the solution is accurate, but as I mentioned, bias. You got to test for bias. You got to test for so many different things, and therefore, if you want to ethically, do this stuff and do it in the right way and a sustainable basis, your effort to continually validate and verify that your model is being tuned accordingly is again significant. So some great learnings, some great conversations, and I guess more to be discussed. Of course, this is a never-ending solution, and obviously the tooling and things that's coming out of the markets are just growing and growing and growing. So and companies got to watch out. Do they share their data? If they're borrowing data, are they sure they know whether the data is trusted or how the data? There's so many sort of ins and outs to all of this stuff, and it's just becoming more complicated as the day goes on, not less. So much more to talk about. But quite exciting.
Yeah, I agree, Maria. I think a lot of your thoughts were around the difference between dipping your toe in and the investment that's needed to really do this properly.
Yeah, definitely would echo the sort of the stark examples that Stuart gave between the kind of delivering a proof of concept with, like Stuart, data that you can buy, tooling that you can buy really easily or more easily, let's say, and then companies almost having this expectation they're going to get their own private chat GPT for the like 99 quid a month or something like that is just not there yet, and so that was a really stark point. And then the other thing that I think I took away was making deliberate decisions, a company making deliberate decisions around what the AI will be responsible for within the company. And if the AI is not responsible for that, who is? And having those conversations around how much risk, how far is a company willing to go with AI to sort of get it to make decisions. Certainly, I think one of the examples we discussed was around kind of using AI as a first stage of hiring, and sifting through different CVs and applications, and if the AI is making those decisions, then who's responsible for helping it make those decisions, and how does that work, and what does that look like if the AI hallucinates and gets it wrong?
There was lots of times we came towards that that who's responsible. Same when we talked about safety, and I love the stuff Stuart you were talking about verifying and how important that is to trust, which then leads on to responsibility. You've got to verify, otherwise you can't trust it, and you shouldn't trust it, which would be irresponsible. So I love the way we got to the fact of making AI responsible. I hadn't really thought about that till now. So that's really good. So thank you, guys. We're just gonna charge around the subjects. I think to give ourselves a bit of time at the end. Maria, just sort of quickly, the customer sessions. What were your sort of key takeaways from that?
Oh, well, I mean, the customer sessions were so broad in a sense, because they covered, we started out looking at customer from a B2B aspect and how customer relationships and feedback works in that environment, because it's still so new for many businesses, and trying to get companies to give companies feedback is not easy. It's difficult.
Yeah.
because there are multiple agendas at play. And then we sort of shifted it out and went into, broadened it out into customer expectations and how businesses within our explore sessions were really trying to grapple with the fact that consumers are shifting towards higher expectations not being met. I mean, we see that through the UK customer satisfaction index. I think it's at a decade low now. Consumers are shifting towards companies wanting to helping them to sort of feel like they're making a difference in terms of social environmental impact. That's pretty clear, but consumers not always wanting to do the work for that, so wanting the brands and the companies to do the work. And then the day-to-day of actually servicing all of these customers and how to collect up all of that information, all of that behavior, and all of that insight into something that the business can use. And I think the things that I took away was identifying these changes and emerging trends is hard for businesses. It's hard for them to prove that in a case that could be made to the board to get funding to do something, right? Because all of the frameworks, all of the measures, all of the metrics are set up in a rear view mirror model, which looks at what's happened in the past. I don't think any of the businesses that we spoke to or involved in the explore sessions had something, which sort of leads a bit into the AI, something that could say, let's predict the future a little bit. Let's look at these emerging trends a little bit. So that was one thing that I really took away, that identification can be hugely challenging. And the other big pocket, I think, was around the sphere of influence. So people in the front line, if I take a sort of typical setup, a contact center, people in the front line often do know what is going on, what the issues are, but getting that voice and that sphere of influence out into areas and pockets that can make decisions and do things with that is still often quite difficult. I was talking with an associate of mine who I've known for over 20 years. We worked in retail together over 20 years, always sort of crossing paths. And we've been talking about the fact that where is my order, Wismo, as we call it, is the top and has been the top driver of contact and customer service teams for 20 years. It has not changed, despite, a whole massive industry being built up around it, from couriers to tracking, to warehouse modeling, you name it, it has happened. Amazon have sort of changed the way, that landscape, but still Wismo is still the top driver of contact in online retail.
It's interesting, because we were seeing that across lots of different sectors as well. We were talking to somebody in the construction industry and somebody else in manufacturing.
Yeah,
same issue, right? And it's not even a mass consumer base, but they're still getting question upon questions. Where's my order? Why don't you know me as one person? Why don't you know me as one customer? Which I was just gobsmacked, to be honest. It's really interesting. Stuart, just quickly, your thoughts on that, on the customer side.
Yeah, and I echo what Maria's saying. I mean, we didn't just do B2B, but B2B was, I think, is where there's some distinct challenges at the moment. I mean, the response rates, as you say, on any form of satisfaction survey are incredibly low across the board, from all the clients that we spoke to. I guess where you've got a small business that's got a very sort of, bespoke offering to a handful of clients, then the relationships become much more personal. It's much more about the one-to-one relationships between the various people in the companies from both parties. So that becomes a little bit more intimate, a little bit easier to get data. Now, whether that's then true representation of trend versus being influenced by the strength of the relationships is highly questionable. But I don't doubt that you get good qualitative information, not necessarily quantitative, obviously. Whereas if you're in a high volume business, to business type world, no one, I think, well, we've not come across anybody who's really cracked the art of getting good, quant and qual from their customers in a timely manner, in a way that can really shape and influence the products and service that the company's offering. So yeah, lots to do, and again, there are various bits of wisdom that's fallen out into what you can do and should do versus what you shouldn't, incentivization and all sorts of things we touched on, right? So but yeah, it's still a minefield.
Yeah, I agree. It's disappointing in a way, isn't it? We've been talking about this stuff, the three of us, amongst other people, for getting on for 20 years now, and some of the themes are still the same. What is interesting, some of the dynamics you talked about, Stuart, about small organisations having that insight. We were talking to a multinational, multi-million-pound turnover manufacturing company that had the same issues, because those issues had grown up with it. You could see that running through people taking ownership of the customer. Then is it the strength of the relationship or the strength of the product that's winning the orders? So it's really interesting to see that going through. A bit disappointing in some ways, but as you keep telling us, Stuart, AI has the answer to all those problems. So diversity and inclusion, I was going to have a quick go at reviewing. This was fascinating from my perspective, because it has all the elements in it that we've seen through development and customer and employee experience over the years. There's lots of good stuff happening. There's lots of good stuff around communities, representing minorities. There's lots of progression in how people are treated. I've got to say, probably a little bit disappointed in how neurodiversity is being looked at. I think the agenda of diversity and inclusion is not itself as inclusive as it could be. And I think probably I was reflecting on this, that the return on investment hasn't properly been worked through in many occasions. And as we know from employee and customer conversations, that has to follow. You have to have a balance between doing the right thing and having a return on investment. So it's progressing. Lots of good people doing lots of really good work, moving the dial for lots of individuals. But we're starting to get, as it gets bigger, to get this contradiction between what do we do for an individual and what do we do for the mass? And that's starting to raise its head. And because the return on investment is not clear, then businesses are starting to back away from it. I think it is under pressure as a movement, even though I think it's established, and it's established in law in a lot of organisations, which is a great thing. I think it's under pressure. One of the elements to that is that it's working a little bit in isolation. I feel, which is, I don't quite know how that changes, how that adapts. But as we know, if these things are going to become business as normal, they're going to become established behaviours that has to break out. And I was really interested in the last 2 or 3 sessions we had. People were talking about that, stuck in the tactical, doing lots of good tactical stuff. But how does it break out to be something which is a real consistent force for good and for good change? And the last thing I think I would say on that is, with some of the other work I do, I talk about and I help people with adult parent-child relationships, and classic things like the trauma triangle, victim, rescuer, and prosecutor. And if you look at that sector from those lenses, I think there's an awful lot of work to be done there. And I think it would help take away some of the pushback that's now being experienced in many companies. So that was probably an awful lot. Sorry, I just realised as I rambled through that was quite a lot to take on. But I think that whole subject is in a really interesting phase. Your thoughts, guys, from those conversations?
Yeah, I guess I had a couple of, I guess, points, back to sort of, I guess, some of the wisdom, which is, I guess, traditionally as human beings, we like to feel comfortable in whatever, guys, in our working environments, right? And obviously, comfort often then incurs in terms of hiring people in the shadow of oneself, right? So because the more people are like you, the more comfortable you are. But clearly, that's not necessarily what you want to try and achieve from a business perspective. You want you want to have those differences of opinions, etc. Right? So then companies introduce respect. So you're respecting other people's views. Then they might go another step further, which was curiosity. You're asking people to be curious, to endeavour to be courageous in terms of looking at other points of views. Even one step further. And actually, I think there's even one step further beyond that, which is discomfort. You literally, the more discomfort you feel, the more you must be in an environment where you've got very competing different opinions and views, which must be highly innovative and highly creative. But clearly you need to get to the stage where you unite on an idea and see it through. But I think there's this dichotomy of like, a value system that drives people to be as one, belonging, but absolutely respects this curiosity and this difference to drive a better business. And take that one further, I think still most of the community groups and the things that you're seeing is against sort of, I guess, the protected characteristics, ethnicity, religion, those sorts of things, age. Whereas actually what you're trying, the value to most businesses is the diversity of thought. Yet we're not creating community groups, on neurodiversity, right? Differences of thinking. And actually, I think that's where actually the true value is in a lot of this stuff. Not again, not just being responsible and doing the right thing, is how you benefit from valuing diversity of thought. And there's still very little I see happening in that, guys.
So I think Stuart, exactly right, and that's sort of what I'm saying. I think it hasn't broken out into that broader view that you've just articulated really well. It hasn't got out of it. That I understand why people are representing and should represent minorities, but at some point it needs to break out of that. It needs to get broader than that to truly be diverse. Maria, you didn't get an opportunity, I don't think, to participate in many of those, but what were your thoughts?
I mean, the two thoughts I sort of came away with was picking up on Stuart's point around belonging. I think where companies have focused very heavily over the last decade on a sort of top-down approach to a value system, there is a lot of the time now, there is a tension between belonging and assimilation of employees. So there's one thing to say that employees feel like they belong, but then there can be a pressure for them to assimilate the company kind of stance, the company values. And I think in order to move forwards, companies really do need to look at how they can approach that differently. Some companies that I'm aware of have started to take more of a view of they plug into their employees' own values and own communities and sort of take the best of those and almost become the neural network for a lot of different values that might exist within their sort of ecosystem, which I always thought was a nice way to run a company. I always think that's a nice way to run a company. So I thought that part was really interesting. And then again, around that sort of diversity of thought and of thinking, and almost sort of we've almost lost the ability to debate within a company healthily, and be okay with certain sprints of uncomfortability. And I think as long as those are deliberate and explicit about what they are, and that they've got a start, a middle, and an end, actually, there's nothing wrong with having within your company sort of routine certain sprints of debate, uncomfortableness, diversity of thought, challenge of thinking, shaking up a little bit internally, without a punitive approach to the fallout of it.
Yeah, a lot of people express that, Maria, in lots of different ways, and some of it is not helped by some of the big stories that hit social media, etc., etc. And I totally agree with the thing about discussion and debate. Some of these decisions are not easy, right? They're not easy. Do you represent one or many? Is just really, really difficult. Anyone that listens to something like the Moral Maze and gets involved in those conversations, they're not easy. I do feel that some of the people are gaining an awful lot of knowledge working in this industry. By the way, I think there's some people in there that are developing capabilities that companies really need, and that is around debate and discussion. And as Stuart said, looking at some uncomfortable areas. That takes us into quickly the future of work. And the future of work covers everything we've just talked about. Okay, you add remote working in there, and you add home working into it. Then you've got all the components that we've talked about in the other three. And that's, again, facing a very different future. My one-liner from that was that the future looks very different. I think we're in for a one-off change, which is going to be interesting. Just quickly, guys, because we're going to run out of time, unfortunately. Let's do ladies first. Maria, what are your thoughts?
I think you summed it up. The future looks very different.
Yeah.
There was so much discussion around the future of work, from what future employees will value, what emerging employees coming into the market value, how to connect employees who are older, who have different experiences, the challenge of connecting those different thoughts and thinking, and almost showing the way. How do you do that through remote? How do you do that remotely? How do you build those bonds? How does information flow through the company, where if everybody's just sat at a screen all the time? I run a remote business, so I know how, and that was designed that way, and it's still bloody hard. So yeah, just I don't think we arrived at any conclusions yet, because I think we're still mining all the data and all the information.
I don't think the conclusion, in a lot of cases, the conclusions aren't there to grasp at the moment in a lot of these things. Stuart, what are your thoughts?
I think, as a summary, I think, traditionally a candidate looking for a role was, and we've documented this, was particularly focused on the what and the why. These days, they're looking for the where, the when, and the how as well, right? And therefore, what the company is offering to satisfy down to an individual level is changing significantly. And actually, then I guess the rub, the thing that I would question companies, traditionally HR processes start with the role definition, and the role definition is sacrosanct, and then everything stems off that. The objectives, the performance management, the recruitment, everything stems from the role. So it's the start of the process. Whereas I actually think when you take an individualistic view in today's world, I actually think the role definition should be the end of the process, and I guess there's a rub rather than a start. So it's an interesting quandary.
I had the advantage or privilege of talking to somebody the other day that was going into their first serious job, and I said, "How did it go?" And she said, "They didn't answer any of my questions." And I thought, well, that was interesting. Okay. But they were interested in how, not so much as what they got, but what the company stood for. What are they doing about issues of social and plan it and all that sort of stuff. And that's what they were interested in. They didn't have to work hard, but they just did not. So one, it's a complete mismatch between education and work, which has done the whole issue. But I thought that was just striking. Didn't answer any of my questions, which I thought was a great comment. So thank you very much, guys. Our next session, we're going to talk about how we bring all this together, and we're putting our heads together now. So thoughts from anybody, or where we go with this, where do we go next? How do we help companies? So that will be our next session next week. So thank you very much. Good to have you back, Maria, as I said. Good to see you again, Stuart. Good to see everybody, and we'll talk next week. That's it. We now have to follow. We have to fill the. Will I find the button to turn it off? Now you see, we've hit a slight snag here, listener, because I went